Carl Sagan is one of the preeminent astronomers of our time. He is known for bringing the heavens to our living rooms with his PBS series Cosmos. His latest work is The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. It explores the country's growing fascination with pseudoscience, astrology, faith heals, the supernatural, and the like. All superstitions that he says threaten to undermine true science. I am pleased to have him here, and I also take note of the fact that he is the David Duncan Professor of Astronomy and Space Sciences and Director of the Laboratory for Planetary Studies at Cornell University, Distinguished Visiting Science at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, California Institute of Technology, and co-founder and president of the Planetary Society, the largest space interest group in the world, and a former Pulitzer Prize winner. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Great to see you. Listen to this. I hate to read too much, but this is it's almost like they've been reading your book. This is from the New York Times for Friday, May 24. Americans flunk science, a study finds. Less than half of all American adults understand that the Earth orbits the Sun yearly, according to a basic science survey. Nevertheless, there's enthusiasm for research, except in some fields like genetic engineering and nuclear power that are viewed with suspicion. Only about 25% of American adults get passing grades in a National Science Foundation survey of what people know about basic science and economics. I mean, this is singing your song, isn't it?
Well, it's certainly what I'm talking about in the demon-haunted world. My feeling, Charlie, is that it's not that pseudoscience and superstition and New Age so-called beliefs and fundamentalist zealotry are something new. They've been with us for as long as we've been human. But we live in an age based on science and technology with formidable technological powers.
Science and technology are propelling us forward at accelerating rates.
That's right. And if we don't understand it, by we I mean the general public, if it's something that, oh, I'm not good at that, I don't know anything about it, then who is making all the decisions about science and technology that are going to determine what kind of future our children live in? Just some members of Congress? But there's no more than a handful of members of Congress with any background in science at all. And the Republican Congress has just abolished its own Office of Technology Assessment, the organization that gave them bipartisan, competent advice on science and technology. They say, we don't want to know. Don't tell us about science and technology.
Surprising, because Gingrich is genuinely interested, I think, in these kinds of things as a, out of his own intellectual curiosity. Does the president still have a science advisor?
He does, John Gibbons, and the vice president is scientifically literate, yes.
Scientifically, a science maven. I mean, you blast them all. Creationists, Christian scientists who you say would rather allow their children to suffer than give them insulin or antibiotics. Astrologers come in for particular scorn on your part.
Well, I would say scorn, just derision.
Derision. A more generous version of scorn. But what's the danger of all this? I mean, this is not the thing that...
There's two kinds of dangers. One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology, in which nobody understands anything about science and technology, and this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along. It's a thing that Jefferson laid great stress on. It wasn't enough, he said, to enshrine some rights in a Constitution or a Bill of Rights. The people had to be educated, and they had to practice their skepticism and their education. Otherwise, we don't run the government. The government runs us.
Jefferson was amazing in his devotion to science. We think of Jefferson as this man who was literate and who was a passionate articulator of freedom. But if you go to Monticello, what you appreciate is he was at heart a scientist, a botanist, an architect, geologist. And if you Meriwether Lewis, as we know from Stephen Ambrose, you know, he wanted him to go out and do experimentations and explore and be skeptical and find answers to passages and explore the West.
Exactly right. And there was also an economic grail there if the Northwest Passage was found. Jefferson said that he was at heart a scientist, that he would have loved to have been a scientist. But there were certain events happening in America that called to him, and so he devoted his life to that kind of politics. Indeed. Yeah. So that generations later, people could be scientists.
Yeah. Have we, the point is made, and maybe by you, you know, is that when's the last time we had a president who made a speech about science? You know,
yeah,
I mean, it made us,
I say that.
You know, it is this notion that science is not of great interest to us in some sense, that somehow we don't want to learn.
You see, people read the stock market quotations and financial pages. Look how complex that is.
And because they know the direct connection to their own.
There's a motivation, but they're capable. Large numbers of people. People are able to look at sports statistics. Look how many people can do that. Understanding science is not more difficult than that. It doesn't involve greater intellectual activities. But the thing about science is, first of all, it's after the way the universe really is and not what makes us feel good. And a lot of the competing doctrines are after what feels good and not what's true.
Okay, but you got to make, I'm not sure you'll go this far with me, but I mean, there's a lot of that is about feeling good, and there's a lot of that that's about hocus pocus, but at the same time, there are millions of people who understand science does not prove religion, but because religion is faith-based, and therefore you should not deny the value of it because it is faith-based and not scientific.
But let's look a little more deeply into that. What is faith? It is belief in the absence of evidence. Now, I don't propose to tell anybody what to believe, but for me, believing when there's no compelling evidence is a mistake. The idea is to withhold belief until there is compelling evidence. And if the universe does not comply with our predispositions, okay, then we have the wrenching obligation to accommodate to the way the universe really is.
So you step forward to say, I deny all religion because I can't see it proved scientifically?
No.
You see, the value of religious experience and the value of reaching for higher experiences.
Let me say, religion deals with history, with poetry, with great literature, with ethics, with morals, including the morality of treating compassionately the least fortunate among us. All of these are things that I endorse wholeheartedly. Where religion gets into trouble is in those cases that it pretends to know something about science. The science in the Bible, for example, was acquired by the Jews from the Babylonians during the Babylonian captivity of 600 BC. That was the best science on the planet then. But we've learned something since then. Roman Catholicism, Reformed Judaism, most of the mainstream Protestant denominations have no difficulty with the idea that humans have evolved from other creatures, that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old, with the Big Bang. They don't have any trouble with that. The trouble comes with people who are biblical literalists, who believe that the Bible is dictated by the creator of the universe to an unerring stenographer.
And so therefore they...
And has no metaphor or allegory.
And from there they make their political and economic choices. And social choices.
And scientific.
And scientific choices. And scientific. And that's part of your problem with that idea.
Exactly.
It is that because for the wrong reasons we make the wrong choices about science.
That's right. So who is more humble? The scientist who looks at the universe with an open mind and accepts whatever the universe has to teach us, or somebody who says everything in this book must be considered the literal truth and never mind the fallibility of all the human beings involved in the writing of this book?
Okay, I mean, I accept that, but I also, the argument being made by many is that, you know, you don't have to, whether a specific scientific act took place as described by some biblical writer is not at the heart of the religious faith and the religious experience.
Some people agree with you and some people don't. Some people think that every jot and tittle in the Bible is essentially throw one thing away to allegory or metaphor, then it's up to everybody to make their own decision.
Then how are we, a lot of this has to do with science in the United States. Are we different than other nations?
Absolutely not. You can see this worldwide. In India, there's a madness about astrology. In Britain, it's ghosts. In Germany, it's rays coming up from the earth that can only be detected by dowsers. Every country has its own specialties. We seem to be fascinated by UFOs right now. But one thing...
What is that? Before you leave UFOs, tell me about you and Professor Mack.
John Mack is a professor of psychiatry at Harvard, who I've known for many years. We were arrested together at the Nevada nuclear test site protesting U.S. testing in the face of a Soviet moratorium on testing. And many years ago, he asked me, what is there in this UFO business? Is there anything to it? And I said, absolutely nothing, except, of course, for a psychiatrist. He is a psychiatrist. Well, he looked into it and decided that there was so much emotional energy in the reports of people who claimed to be abducted that it couldn't possibly be some psychological aberration, that it had to be true. He believed his patients. I do not believe his patients. Many of these stories are about waking up from a deep sleep and finding your bed surrounded by 3 or 4 short, dour, gray, and sexually obsessed beings, who then take you to their spaceship after they slither you through your wall and perform a variety of objectionable sexual experiments.
But here we have Dr. Carl Sagan, astronomer, versus Dr. what's his first name?
Mack.
John Mack. MD.
No question. So what's the problem?
He's a scientist.
How can scientists disagree?
He's a scientist.
Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking what do you think of this man coming to these conclusions?
I think he is not using the scientific method in approaching his issue.
And when you constantly, I assume you come at him with both barrels in conversation.
And in the demon-haunted world.
And he says?
He says, I don't appreciate the emotional force.
You don't?
Of these reports. But many people awaken from a nightmare with profound emotional force. That doesn't mean that the nightmare is true. It means something went on inside our head.
You were making a point before I jumped to John Mack.
Oh, yeah. What I wanted to say is, going back to the question of adequate evidence on something that's emotionally really pulling you. I lost both my parents about 12 or 15 years ago, and I had a great relationship with them. I really miss them. I would love to believe that their spirits were around somewhere, and I'd give almost anything to spend 5 minutes a year with them.
Do you hear their voices ever?
Sometimes. About 6 or 8 times since their death I've heard it. Carl, just in the voice of my father or my mother. Now, I don't think that means that they're in the next room. I think it means that
they're in your head.
I've had an auditory hallucination. I was with them so long, I heard their voices so often. Why shouldn't I be able to make a vivid recollection of it?
Here's what's interesting about this for me. I mean, you won't see this, but I'll throw it at you anyway. You convinced me a long time ago that it was arrogant for me or for anyone else to believe that there wasn't some life outside of our...
To exclude the possibility.
To exclude the possibility was an arrogance of intellect that we should not assume. You couldn't prove it, you didn't know it was there, but the arrogance for you...
Right, we don't know if it's there, we don't know if it's not there. Let's look.
And if you take that, why can't you say there's a lot we don't know? There's a lot of power there that we don't know.
There's a lot we don't know.
You know,
it's what I believe.
But
that doesn't mean that every fraudulent claim has to be accepted. We demand the most rigorous standards of evidence, especially on what's important to us. So if some guy comes up to me, and a channeler or a medium, and says, I can put you in touch with your parents. Well, because I want so terribly to believe that, I know I have to reach in for added reserves of skepticism, because I'm likely to be fooled and much more minor to have my money taken.
What was it, J.Z. Knight? Was it?
Yeah, exactly. She has a guy named Ramtha, who's 10,000 years old or
35.
Something. 35, yeah. He tells you lots of things, but nothing about what life was like 35,000 years ago.
Shirley MacLaine believes.
Shirley MacLaine believes that Ramtha was her brother.
Things like the Loch Ness Monster, and big, all that.
Again, is it
photograph?
Fakes. I mean, the most famous photograph has now been shown to be a fake, but could there be a unknown mammal or even reptile of large dimensions swimming in a Scottish lake? Sure there could. That we don't know about? Sure there could. Who says no?
But nobody.
But the evidence does not support it, does not demonstrate it. So do we say, oh, ridiculous? No, we don't do that. We say unproved, which is a Scottish verdict.
Some reviewers differ with your conclusions on this point, that you seem to say it's growing, this kind of pseudoscience.
No, sorry to interrupt. I don't. This is part of being human. Humans have had this way of magical thinking through all of our history. The problem is that today the technology has reached formidable, maybe even awesome proportions, and so the dangers of thinking this way are larger. Not that this is a new...
You are living with myelodysplasia.
Or I have been.
You have been. It's in remission. Or you have... what?
Well, you know, with diseases of this sort, and all cancers...
Cancer of the bone marrow?
It's myelodysplasia is not exactly cancer of the bone marrow, but if untreated, it inevitably leads to leukemia. And the trouble with all these diseases is you never know that you've got every last cell. You can only detect down to a certain level. But down to the level that anybody can detect, and in terms of how I feel and my stamina and all that, it seems to be gone. I'm very lucky.
Because you had a sister who now enabled you to have a bone marrow transplant.
That's one, and also the enormous advances in in medical science in just the last few years. If I had had this thing 5 or 10 years ago, I would be dead sure as shooting. And then finally, the love and support of my family. All of those have played a central role.
So you're optimistic?
I'm very optimistic, or at least very hopeful.
And just share with us, because of your sense of language and your sense of understanding and being reflective and introspective, what do you think about, and what does it do for you to
I didn't have any
near-death
experiences. I didn't have a religious conversion, but I
thought about what it would be like to die.
Certainly, and what it would be like for my family, and I didn't much think about what it would be like for me, because I don't think it's likely there's anything that you think about after you're dead.
That's it. Huh?
Yeah, long dreamless sleep. I'd love to believe the opposite, but I don't know of any evidence. But one thing...
Faith, Carl, faith.
One thing that it has done is to enhance my sense of appreciation for the beauty of life and of the universe, and the sheer joy of being alive.
You had a healthy portion of that before this, but even you, it happens to.
Oh, there's no question.
Appreciation.
No question. Every moment, every inanimate object, to say nothing of the exquisite complexity of living beings, Yeah, you imagine missing it all, and suddenly it's so much more precious.
May you live a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Pleasure.
Same here.
Carl Sagan, Science as a Candle in the Dark. The title of the book is A Demon-Haunted World. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.